I could do the glitch that basically gives you of those infinite points, but I really don't want to disrespect this game. Even though I have legit thought of doing it, but the game isn't really as hard as, say, Dark Souls. It just requires a little more patience. I also really don't give a shit if the game is slower paced or not. Like, I thought people liked the slower, methodical, you know, chess combat that Dark Souls has, but yet this game is considered clunky. Like, by that fucking logic, Demon Souls would be fucking clunky. Fucking goofy-ass four-way directional rolling. Can't even jump in that game. The fucking combat is so 2000s, and it's just like... People are really fucking biased when it comes to the game, but don't you dare criticize our game or else we told to get good. Like, that is some fucking grade A fanboy mentality, honestly. But like I said, I'm not going to get too worked up about it. I'm just going to try to hopefully enjoy myself for the time being. Get that extra XP or whatever. Mainly building up the multiplier for the later parts. And of course, the boss fight to come. Which I don't think I'm going to go for this special version, even though I did do that for one of the trophies. Basically, to get 12 of the rare weapons, I think. Which was not too bad. Most of it could be earned by beating bosses in certain ways. They're not really explained, but considering the game's checkpoint system, I guess you could try to experiment. It's kind of one of those things that could be considered trial and error, but it's definitely interesting to say the least. I honestly thought the beast was going to be pretty hard, because you have to apparently win without taking damage. But it's only taking poison damage is what goes against it, but with the codex and having it all 3 rune locks, having 3 flawless rune slots equipped in it, you can basically literally stun lock the boss. It's kind of ridiculous, and he always does the 1 wake up attack move, so you could do like 2. You could do a running attack, which is massive damage. You can do another attack followed by proper timing, which, unlike shitty ass Neo 2, you don't necessarily need to use the timing, but it does help. And I also read up, or I think I remember listening to Lich and Pyro Megadeth's videos on Lords and Fallen, which it definitely does help with the, having, even though it's an old ass video, I still really like listening to it. Them riffing on good old Phil and Slow Beef is just legendary content in my opinion, but it also helps with the mood too. But anyway, I know that the running attack right there is really fucking fast, and if you also follow up with a special attack, if you follow up with a proper attack, proper timing, you'll do extra damage. You'll see a little thing from your stamina bar. I don't think it works after you kick though, but unlike Neo 2, you don't necessarily need to use it, but it does help. You don't have to fucking do active reload, you just fucking live or whatever, which I still can't stand that shit, but I'm gonna probably go back to that game once I'm completely cleaned out of this game. Because I do want to try to clear up that space too. I think people will be in for a surprise when I go back to the game. Just stay tuned. Yeah, you see how good old Harkin did Harkin's stamina bar? That's actually the thing I was mentioning just now. If you time your attacks at the right point, you actually do, I think, you actually basically make your moves come out a little faster. Wow, I cannot speak tonight. It's kind of a cool mechanic. I think one of the game's loading screens mentioned this little tip. But while it's not necessary, it definitely helps separate the men from the boys. And I believe each weapon type has its own timing, so it's always cool to learn. I also like that this game does have the challenge arenas where you can basically fight different waves of enemies, but unfortunately they're all scripted, so you can't really practice against a particular enemy. But I know that the enemies you do fight up against, I believe you can fight them earlier than what you're supposed to and kind of get a feel for how they fight later on. I definitely have to say that the mages and those poison and fire beasts are probably some of the most annoying enemies in the game. They're really banned. No, they're really damage spongy, and the mage has an area of effect attack when it dies, and it's pretty much impossible to avoid unless you block, which is fucking gay. And apparently this gate you can't even get to until the very end of the game, but even then there's still things to find, which is always cool. I still really find it fascinating. There's only really 4 major areas of the game, and yet, despite this game's really short level count, I do find it kind of cool to how they basically try to retool it so that you're always going to be finding new areas even within this small condensed area, which is kind of cool. Unfortunately, it also kind of makes the game a bit limited because I was honestly thinking there could be maybe more areas to explore, but no, it's really compact. It still has some decent level design, of course, don't get me wrong, but I definitely think that there could have been like maybe another extra area or two. I know what the DLC is supposed to do, but I'll probably check that out after I've done the base game trophies, which thankfully there's only one needed for New Game Plus, and it's right after beating the final boss, so I'll probably do that at some point. The Codex is also pretty good for taking out those big dudes, because when you do jumping attack into a heavy attack, they basically, I think they get stumped. I think you break their guard or something, and again, with the 3 flawless luck runes, it basically turns your sword to a fucking cannon. Not even a glass cannon, just a cannon. Like, actual fucking strength. Not really a fan of how most of the weapons in this game can be socketed. So, a lot of the weapons are kind of useless, except for select few. One of them, of course, being some of the boss weapons, mainly the Auras, because of that overpowered healing ability. I don't think it really costs that much, to be honest. And even when I fought the final boss, I actually realized just how ridiculous the healing, or the consumables are. It's like, you get one that basically makes your stamina regenerate extremely quickly, and the magic one just basically, while it doesn't necessarily let you spam it, it definitely does recharge a lot faster than it does on its own. And it actually helped him with the other boss before the Annihilator. I think it's the Guardian or something. It's the boss you fight with the dual swords. It's probably the fastest enemy in the game. Not as bullshit as the, what's his face, the fire dude from Demon Souls, and has a much better run back to boot. But holy crap, does the game pace speed up. You know what I'm not really a fan of is that the fucking arena has a bunch of these fire-seeking attacks, and you can basically die when it happens. But it is thankfully pretty telegraphed, but if you don't push out and ignore them, you actually do get the boss's upgraded weapon, I guess, if you want to call it. So I guess it's worth dealing with the bullshit. I did find it ridiculous that one of the shields, I don't know if it's because of the specific shield or if it's the shield type, but basically if you block with that specific shield type, it basically makes the boss's attack pattern kind of reset, so you can basically kind of bait him to doing his little kick attack, and you can follow up with shift or quake, which, trust me, using shift with that boss was not a fun time at all. It was really fucking annoying. I kind of got really annoyed at that, to be honest. Like, what the fuck? Why is it not doing it? But I think after a couple tries, I finally got it. Definitely the most annoying part of that fight was the fireballs, but it definitely does pay off regardless if you learn the timings, I guess. But I really like that this game has some really good runbacks. I think they're pretty much non-existent. So I'll definitely give this game that much credit. Like, developers actually realized how fucking obnoxious the runbacks are, and they actually made it extremely reasonable. Even though this game does not necessarily reuse, but having you revisit areas, you can just actually appreciate even further on just how generous the runbacks are. It's ridiculous. It's like when you go to the Rogar homeworld the first time, you realize that very first checkpoint is actually right next to the boss if you go to it right away, which is holy shit. It's almost as if these things don't necessarily make the game harder on purpose or something from software. Like, I don't think having an extra checkpoint or two is going to kill the challenge the game doesn't already offer. But what do I know? I'm not Japanese, so whatever. I'm still uncertain if I'm going to get the reboot, though, or whatever they're calling it. I really don't know if I'm able to stomach another Souls game, honestly. Unless it's something like Code Vein 2, or even trying to finish up Salt and Sacrifice. Like, that one I actually do want to at least try to finish, but my backlog has been quite hampered. And I really want to try to get some PS5 games done so I can delete to move on to other bigger and better things. Not a fan of these Berserker dudes, mainly because they can kind of get the first hit and they're very annoying. So, I don't really like them, to be honest. At least they're actually glass cannons, though. Like, they can dish out quite a bit of damage, but they're not really that bad, I guess. But they're still kind of a nuisance, especially in numbers. But yeah, definitely the running attack for the Codex is some good shit. It's really fast and it just does strong damage, as they say. Strong. Alright, I guess I'll head to the Citadel, I guess. I want to see if I'm still able to get any potions from Hagrid, motherfucker. Can I even use this sword one-handed? Okay, it looks like I can. I probably should, to be honest. It's actually apparently one of the best shields in the game. But you get it so late into the game that I don't know if it's even worth using a New Game Plus. Not that I really care, to be honest. I'm just going to get the feats and be done. Not really a fan of how Dark Souls' idea of New Game Plus is just literally inflating the damage, and that's basically it. I guess it makes sense, but it's just... It just makes some bosses even more annoying than they actually were. The only good thing about it is the exclusive loot you can get, and the potential of getting maybe 1 or 2 extra items that you couldn't get before, because you had to make a choice on whether to get one or the other. That's basically it. Even people can agree that Dark Souls 2 does it even best, because you at least get to have extra enemy spawns, which definitely does ramp up the challenge a bit, even though some of the things are still there, but at least it makes it more interesting, I guess, in that one aspect. But I didn't really watch the video per se, because I quite frankly wasn't really interested. It was from a channel from Dark Souls I really like. It's called Illusory Wall, and I believe he makes some of the best Dark Souls videos, in my opinion, next to Zolly. Though I haven't watched the videos in a while, I've kind of fallen out of that. But I know that, well, I don't think she's ever done voiced videos. I know that her and Illusory have made videos about Dark Souls that are actually interesting and not just fucking lore nonsense that people love to go on about, like the fucking Jehovah's Witnesses, but I know Illusory Wall has made mechanic videos basically breaking down, like, the inner things or whatever, like, shit. Let me fucking run away from this dude. I don't want to fucking die. Or actually, wait, I'm in this area, so I could technically get my health back later, so let me stop being retarded and fucking fight this fucker. Okay. Now then. There's a video that Illusory Wall put out basically describing the Dark Souls DLC, the first one. And I saw a comment thread that just oozes fucking autism. And I hate to use that because I know some people get offended at that word when, quite frankly, any word on the internet can be considered offensive. Like, even so much as saying retarded could make somebody pissed off, which I don't know why. Like, people kind of really need to get over that, but whatever. But anyway. And there's also a lot worse that could be said, too, by the way. I don't think that word is necessarily, like, the absolute worst thing you can say, but... And I'm not even just talking about, like, racial words, too, but anyway. The common thread just oozing autism with, like, people basically saying that it's great that the Dark Souls DLCs doesn't necessarily give you the keys right away, and you have to basically find the DLC on your own rather than just being a thing you can access in the main menu or some shit. And it's like, what the fuck? When did this idea of Dark Souls elitism basically go from people who know how these games work to the point that if anyone so much as criticizes the DLC in any capacity are just seen as this lower city fucking slum dwellers that dare have any peace of mind to speak on about this god tier game that is Dark Souls? And it's like, I honestly don't get it with these fucking people who think that paying money for DLC that was on console be this fucking vague and cryptic. I don't think it was like with Bloodborne where it was actually a thing on the PS4 menu where it literally tells you to get to the DLC. It's like, how fucking elitist and uptight are these people that if you so much as criticize something that you're basically paying for on console, by the way, that you're just a dude who complains on Reddit because, oh my god, I didn't get what I want, that I paid good money for. Which, first of all, the DLC for Dark Souls 1 was basically implemented in the PC version of Dark Souls, which, mind you, was a really shitty port even for, what was it, 2012, 2013, whatever, I don't fucking know, nor do I care. And for the console users, you had to pay $15, which is fucking absurd. Like, they legit make it... Okay, let me retrace my steps, because I want to fucking give out misinformation. They released Dark Souls on PC, but included Prepare to Die, or Towards the Abyss, sorry. And they released it as Prepare to Die Edition, which, for people going about how Dark Souls 2 is scum of the earth because, God forbid, they have a thing where they advertise the game and use it in their lingo, whatever the fuck, Dark Souls 1 and 2 are equally as guilty for advertising their games as Prepare to Die, but because Dark Souls 1 has it in a little intro, yeah, your precious snowflake Dark Souls 1 isn't exactly getting off scot-free, but that's not about that. But the PC version of Dark Souls 1 was released with the DLC on board, whereas people who still played on console, the sub 30 frames per second releases or whatever, they had to pay $15 for a DLC, and yet they don't even really explain how the fuck you're supposed to get to the DLC. With the only visual indication, provided you even get that far enough, which I believe requires placing the Lord Vessel, which is quite a bit into the game, really. I believe it's after the magical duo Ornstein and Smo, which is fine, whatever. Dark Souls... Well, mainly Dark Souls, whatever. I don't know how Elden Ring's handling. Quite frankly, I don't even care, but this is about Dark Souls, so I'm just going to keep it at that. I know that Dark Souls, or little any game really, it's not that you have to go to a separate menu to start the DLC. You usually have to go to somewhere to activate the DLC. But I know that with Dark Souls logic, they usually make you go to a specific area first. I believe in Dark Souls 2, you were given a key if you had the DLC, but in Scholar, they make you sit to find the keys instead. Which is kind of why some people prefer playing Dark Souls 2 vanilla compared to the Scholar version, because you can access the DLCs after beating specific bosses. Or in the case of the third DLC for Dark Souls 2, after getting to the... right before you access Dragon Lake Castle. You can actually go right to the third DLC before ever stepping foot in Dragon Lake Castle. And yet, in Dark Souls 2 Scholar version, you actually have to step foot a little bit into Dragon Lake Castle before you can even access the DLC. So, the concept of having to access a specific area to get to a DLC isn't really anything new for these games. And ironically, Dark Souls 3 kind of did it best, with the first DLC being relatively early on in the game, and with the second DLC for Dark Souls 3, they make it so that you have to pretty much be at the end of the game, and it's so hard to miss that it'd be pressed. But I'll actually give Dark Souls 3 credit for having the second DLC being readily accessible if you manage to beat the bullshit its sister Freed. Being rewarded for actually beating a shitty boss like that is certainly well worth the praise, even for a shitty game series like Dark Souls. But with Dark Souls 1, it's like they give you no indication that you have the DLC or whatever besides one of the enemies in what the hell is it called? The fucking area with the crystal sea fucker, the giant fucker boss who's not that fun to fight, quite frankly. There's an enemy they placed there, and the only way you would get the key to access the DLC is to basically kill an enemy that is set to spawn right near the entrance to the Duke's Archive. That's what it's called, the Duke's Archive. I don't know why I couldn't think of it for a second. I was almost going to say something related to RuneScape, but whatever. So basically, to find a key, you have to kill off from an enemy who's already knowing to fight, and then you have to go to an area that's completely unrelated, and then you get access to the DLC. But here's the thing, though. Before you can even do any of that, you actually have to defeat the Hydra, and you also have to defeat a golden crystal fucker. I know I keep saying fucker after whatever, but whatever. I don't fucking care. Cry. Fucking cry about it. Fucking babies. Anyway. So you basically have to do something in-game that's part of the base game before you're even allowed to access the DLC, which is kind of cryptic, because I'm not saying the game needs to have, like, navigational waypoints, but people in this fucking comment thread are just like, they're basically citing the shit that you see in modern games, like having waypoints or whatever, and it's like, it's so retarded. It's like those people on news articles about how kids in school these days can't keep their eyes off their phones. Like, this is shit I had to deal with when I was in school, and I'm seeing the same discourse again and again. It's like, dude, did this bullshit just not die at all? Like, I don't get it. Like, why are people so fucking stupid? I just personally think that $15 is a fucking ripoff for a DLC that's not explicitly explained. At least in Dark Souls 2, you get a key item right when you have the DLC ready to go. Now, granted, you can't go to the DLC right away, but at least you kind of have a visual indicator that yes, you can go to the DLC when you reach it. And even with the item that is given to you, you can kind of get an idea. And I'm also pretty sure social media was relatively at its solar peak when it was, back in 2014 or whatever. So it's not that it was just this super cryptic shit, but at least with Dark Souls 2, it was given more leeway, and I'm also pretty sure the stones or whatever in Majula give you a little indicator of where you're supposed to go. Also doesn't help that even with Dark Souls 2 letting you continue playing the game after you beat the bosses or whatever, the final boss, excuse me, you can actually do a thing called Explore and not just have to go directly for the game again. It's kind of what Bloodborne fucked up on. The main reason why DSP, of all people, quit his original DLC playthrough, because he was basically forced into Game Plus, not thinking that you wouldn't have to necessarily go through the whole game again, which thankfully we need to go through 2 bosses, Father Asshole and, for some reason, turn into degenerate furry porn, whatever the fuck the boss name is. I really don't know, nor do I care. All I know is that there's some people into really freaky shit, but whatever. But there's also another thing with the DLCs of From Software, actually. I don't think any of them really had any achievements or feats or whatever, even though a lot of these games with DLC have achievements. Remember good old Seth from 17 basically saying that From Software are breaking the rules, which is kind of interesting, actually. And I think the only Dark Souls or whatever game to have achievements for their DLCs is, funny enough, Bloodborne. I guess you could technically count Dark Souls 2 Solar First Sin as well, but the only reason people would even count it to begin with is because you actually get the spells from the DLC, which pretty much includes fighting everyone's favorite fucker, Sir Alan, which is not that fun. But whatever. At least the DLC in Dark Souls 2 is a bit more dynamic in that way, as You basically have to get to the end of the game if you want to fully see the rest of one of the DLCs. But whatever. But that's neither here nor there. Whole point is that this fucking comment thread from a video that I'm sure is quite good, by the way, just goes to show how some out of touch these people are, and just quite frankly annoys that people think that they need to go back to having hand-holding bullshit when you're basically paying money for a good product, and yet it's not even cohesively clear on how you're supposed to fucking access the DLC within the game's gamer language. Obviously, yes, if you're buying a Souls game or whatever the fuck, even this game, you don't necessarily get access to the DLC right away. You actually have to wait until you beat one of the bosses, which is fine. The problem is that when you downplay people thinking that these games have this fucking bullshit waypoint system, it's just ridiculous. It's like, yes, we get that games are dumbed down a lot, but do we really have to do this bullshit with games that people are considered good? Whatever. It just goes to show that this fucking Souls fandom is completely fucking biased and quite frankly elitist, and I am annoyed with it. Whatever. Kinda said I want a fucking DLC tangent about another game that tried to do whatever, but whatever. Better explain it in a video than fucking typing it on Twitter where it doesn't get any traction.